Real, true education, not fake news. It's the 6th of December 2020 and you're very welcome back to the channel. And I'm very busy. We had hard frost last night, good weather enough, and the year is wearing in now nicely. And Cavan, our local team, were beaten. They played Dublin yesterday evening in Croke Park and they were beaten. But they put up a good spirited display and we had a bit of fun with them. There was only a small number of people allowed in, so enough said about that. I'm going to look here again at something that's very close to my heart, and it's a time bomb that's clicking away, and it's 17A6. The 17 series tends to be on this subject, and I'd like to stick to it, and it's electricity prices. Shouldn't be very long video. On a nice summer's evening, Ireland is using or even a summer's night, let's say about 2 o'clock in the morning, maybe in the evening a bit more, but it's a summer's evening anyway, Ireland night, it's using 2,000 megawatts at night, be using about 2,500 at 5 o'clock on a nice summer evening, maybe a Sunday evening. 3,400 megawatts is the average demand for electricity in Ireland, and in the winter, in an early January day, it often rises to 5,000. It has rarely ever gone above 5,000. So 5,000 megawatts is the maximum we've ever had, we've ever been using. Now Ireland needs to cover that 6,000 megawatts. It needs 6,000 because there's always a danger of a plant breaking or something going wrong, and it needs a little extra. So an extra 1,000 comes in useful. And as I say, demand is 2,000 to 5,000 megawatts. There, a megawatt is 1,000. Domestic units, which a unit is a kilowatt, and a megawatt is 1,000 kilowatts. It's 1,000,000 watts, and a kilowatt is 1,000 watts. Now, a watt is very small. A watt would only be about a candle, very small. The kilowatt will be roughly what your ring of your electric cooker will use. Now, it's possible that you couldn't crib if they increased the capacity to generate to 7,000 fossil fuel. All of this now gone is fossil fuel. So they could put up to 7,000 because there could be a bit of an increase in demand, and it'd be nice to have a bit of plant there. But you must remember that there's a big difference in plant that's all on the one pedestal, all on the one, let's say, factory. If you decide to put extra plant in where there's already plant, well, the same staff will run it. Whereas if you have a new plant, you might need extra staff and it's more expensive. Okay. Now, currently wind energy is 3,700 and they're determined to plug on with more of this, 3,700 megawatts. And if you look at that, that's more than the average demand. The average demand is 3,400. On a summer's night, if you had a windy night, you'd have a lot of it over. Okay. Now, the hope is to increase the wind to 5,000 at least, and to keep at it as long as they can. They think it's a money maker, right? Okay. And in order to have the 3,700 megawatts of wind energy, they have to put in 2,300 megawatts of fast-acting plant. Now, there always has to be 35% fossil. There always has to be 35% fossil. You see that there? Always has to be, because the grid would go unstable. It has a frequency regulation. It needs to stay at 50 hertz. So 2,300 fast-acting plant is put in, and this is because the wind is stochastic. It changes all the time. It goes from high output to low output, and the best and most efficient plant is the good old big heavy plant running on heavy fuel oil, coal, or whatever. It runs all the time and it keeps what they call base load going. But the problem with it is if you demand it to keep moving up and down, it's very hard on it. It breaks it, it damages it. It's not really made for that. It's more like a huge ship and a speedboat. You can't expect the ship to do a quick about turn. It doesn't work like that. It's a huge heavy vessel. And it's the same with this. It's the best plant of all for all of the basic needs, and where you have, we'd say, always need maybe 2,500 megawatts, you could have that as base plant. But it's no good for the wind, because when the wind blows, it has to, by law, be bought by the companies. Okay, So as I say, there's a big difference. So they're aiming for 15,000 megawatts total, but we now have 12,000 roughly. There's a big difference in electricity generating plant, which is in a building, which you add on in a building because the same staff can run it, and electricity plant where it's spread out. So if you open a new power station, it needs staff, it needs extra lines, it needs extra power lines. Whereas if you put it on the same one, well, you might have to strengthen the lines a bit, but the same staff will do. You might only use it in an emergency. So here's the breakdown. We have 6,000 megawatts of traditional generating plant. We have 3,300 of fast-acting gas plant, which is less efficient than the 6,000 megawatts above, and then there's 3,700 of wind, and they intend to increase that. So that's 12,000 megawatts in total. 12,000 megawatts. So in the case of wind energy, it's dispersed. So each company has to get a slice of the cake. You can't really use the one administration and offices and everything for them. They're all different owned and all that sort of stuff. So the idea is everyone puts up one and gets something out of it. Is the thing out of their building. So the business model for wind energy is to build it and sell on. Build it and sell on. That's not really the business model for conventional generating plant. They tend to build it and run it. But the model for wind energy is like builders building a house. We'll build 20 houses and we'll sell them. That's how they make their money. That's all right for houses that have a residual value and a good value, but wind energy rapidly runs out of puff. After a few years, it's facing obsolescence and it's facing having to be shut down. So it's not the same. So now at the moment, Gay Electric and Brookfield Renewables, Gay Electric has gone wallop, it's gone bust, and Brookfield Renewables is pulling out of Ireland. And Greencoat is another big company. It's 120 megawatts about, 110, 120, and it said it's looking for share capital. So we have some of the big players gone or getting out or trying to get out, and they won't get out because nobody's going to buy these plants anymore. They're a nightmare for anyone that buys them, and they're a nightmare for the owner of the land because the wind company can run away. And so Greencoat's looking for share capital, and I did a video on that. It's almost certain anyone who invests in that will never get the money back. So just to explain to you again, we have doubled the capacity. We didn't double our electricity bills yet, we're doing it by increments. But as they double the electricity bill, the poor can't afford electricity and fuel poverty goes up. And they never ever realised that this had happened. They actually thought that when they put in windmills, you could shut down the fossil fuel plant and get rid of it, stop burning fuel. Whereas in actual fact, you need more of it. This ridiculous situation I predicted several years ago, told ministers and everything, and nobody was interested. So anyway, Joe Duffy was on last Friday week. This is the 6th, 4th. It's a week from the 4th of December, back in November. So week prior to that. It was about 2 o'clock on the day, and I got a call from somebody to put on my radio in the car, and I did. And it was Joe Duffy, the famous Joe. Now he vets you. You just can't get on this too easily. It's not too easy to do that. And there was a lady there, and she was charged for power she never used. She was a tailor down in Cork, and she had a policy or a bill with a deal with ESB Electric Ireland, which is the old ESB, the old power provider, that she'd have to use a certain amount, and she knew she'd use that. But the COVID arrived in, and the COVID meant she had to close up. And she was way down, she only used a tenth of what she'd normally use, and the result was that she got a bill for the difference. She got a bill of 90 extra for not using enough electricity. Now this is the very company who's been telling us for so long we have to cut down, and it's great to cut down, and we have to reduce our power demand for emissions and CO2 reduction and global warming and all this, and it's billing people for not using enough electricity. So Joe was doing his note about this, and he was all about it, and he's as ignorant as can be because he won't listen to anyone who knows it. And the other problem is there's huge arrears now. A lot of people arrears. In Northern Ireland there's 1 in 5 people in arrears, and in the south they're surely about the same. Just can't pay their bill, and they pay a bit off every week. Because electricity is essential. I mean, it works the heating and it works several other things. There's huge arrears, and as I say, ESB Electric Ireland is the worst of them. It's the worst of them. I know a case where they demanded 4,000 of a person who took over a premises, and they didn't have the meter read, and the previous fella walked off, and they're trying to load it on the new fella. So you need to demand of them to come out, but in this case he did, and they didn't come out, didn't bother, didn't do it right, they didn't disconnect it right and reconnect it and all that stuff, and as a result they're billing the last owner for the earlier bill, and they're pushing him for it and threatening to cut him off, and the only thing is the law is on his side. He could take advice. I looked it up. The law is on his side. They have to give him an itemised bill, and they can't because they're trying to put on the previous owner's bill. They don't even know when he took up. They didn't do it right because they're stretched. They have nothing. They're broke, these companies. So the demand was for 4,000 of a customer, and there was no unit information. So you take your woman in Cork, and you take the Joe Duffy, and you take this person I know, and this is happening all over. And it's high time to get away from ESB Electric Ireland. Now they're all caught a bit with this, but they're the worst. They're the most dysfunctional. They were singing about this great wind energy. So if you look at 12,000 is what we have, we need 6. We have 2 times or twice the amount of power generation plant we need, and a big lump of that is wind, and they have to make their money. So you have 2 duplicate systems, and you can't turn off the earlier one at all. You have to keep it. You have to keep the staff, and you have to keep it. You have to keep all there. A complete duplicate system, only one of which actually works. So Joe Duffy was all about the energy regulator. This is the utility, Commission for Utility. They give them a big fancy change in name every so often. I met this fellow about 8 years ago. Useless. He's just jacking up the bill, and he wouldn't answer the phone for Joe. Joe, where's the energy regulator? I'll tell you where he is. No regulator works in Ireland. And if Joe Duffy was doing his job as a journalist, he'd have let me and others and look at my dossier. As I say, I got a few people looking for my dossier. You get it on my email address on an earlier video there, VALAMHIC, balapic@gmail.com, and I'll send it to you. They're broke. But the problem is, folks, and I'll just do it on the back of this paper here. You see, they're normally in a market where you just have enough to cover your basic needs, and then you buy the electricity, the supplier, and they sell it on to you and me and charge a little profit. But they have to pay double, as well as the main system. The main system, which should be 6,000 megawatts, they have to pay for 2,300 more. They have to pay. This has to be paid for, and it has to be serviced and everything. But then you get the wind with 3,700 and more connecting up all the time. And as they realise that this duplicate system, the wind companies have their hand out. They're not getting enough because they thought they'd get a load factor of 34%. They thought that the wind would blow in order to give output 34% of the time, or 34 days in 100. That's what they were told by EirGrid. But anyone can tell you that doesn't happen at all. And if I look out the window, and I'm looking right now at a wind turbine number 5 of the Rara windmill wind farm, and there's how it's going round. Watch my finger. Watch now. It's barely going round. It will stop most of the day. So we count how long it takes it to do a circle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It takes 10 seconds. Now you see how I counted, I might be accurate, for it to go round once. That can't be producing anything. It's only just there for a bit of a show. And that's the way most of the time. So they have to try and make their money, but instead of getting 34%, they're doing well to get 20%. And possibly, folks, it's really down to about 17%. Watching this one here, it's a complete disaster. So they're getting about 17% of its possible output if the wind blew continuously. So they're not getting enough in. When they get the money in from the consumer, they're not getting enough. And the regulator put up the price there a little bit up to, added on, I think it's 50 he added 50 euros a year onto the average bill, along with the 30 that's there already to try and cover them. But they'd need another 100 to be even in with a chance. So what's happening is these companies can't pay their way. They're broke. And the regulator is in a spot because if he jacks up electricity prices, arrears is going to go up. They're going to have to disconnect people, and there's going to be huge suffering. That'll be embarrassing for the government, and Sinn Féin are there barking at their heels. And this mess, they simply couldn't count this. This mess now is coming down the road, and there was the first programme on it about that. It's sad really that this is the ignorance we're running, and this is the government that's doing all this COVID lockdown and all that, and they can't simply figure out that in advance. They must have thought that they could turn off the fossil fuel plant and replace it with wind. And EirGrid has a lot to answer for, but 34% would be good enough. It would be good enough, but it's not really enough. But I mean, the wind does not blow in that way. And when you get good wind, then they have to cut it down, because only 65% at most can be allowed into the grid. And if you just write on the back of the 65%, like for example, if you get a real windy day and we'd say all the windmills are producing 3,000, they're 3,700, we'd say they're 3,000. So that's what they're getting out there, 3,000. Yeah. Well, the demand has to be divide that by 30. The demand has to be that has to be 35. That has to be 65%. So there has to be 35% of other sort of fuel there, right? So if that was a summer's eve, if that was we'd say a May evening when it's not too much demand might be just 3,000. And they're ready to put in this, but they can't, because there has to be 35% of a fossil fuel plant. So you can, 35% of that is roughly 2,000. So all they can get in is 2,000. So they have to tell 1,000 of it they can't sell their wares. Can't sell their wares. It's only if you got a good, real cold, windy January, we say the 7th of January, so it's a Tuesday, and it's really cold and wet, and if you got that, you could let in this 3,000, but that's only for a few months of the year, and the chances are it'll be frosty and it'll be inversion. In other words, there'll be no wind and they won't be able to sell it. So when they have it to sell, they can't sell it, and when they don't have it to sell, they can't sell it either. It's a complete and utter mess, but they have to pay their way. And up until now, what they did was they sold on to some company that was prepared to carry them because of this thing about ethics. Well, you have to show you're green, you see. So the National Toll Roads, NTR, they bought into Tier Worker over here, and they have a disaster on its hands. They're getting nothing, and there's complaints from the residents and all that. So it's a complete and utter mess. How they're going to get out of it, I don't know. I hope they don't get out of it. It might incur a bit of the wrath of the people, but what are they going to do? These companies, if the likes of the big companies stop buying them and stop running them as a charity, these companies go broke straight away, and they're just doing it because of this green credentials thing. And I had a complaint in again SSE, and they said, well, you can't say where the electricity come from. This old baloney, they wouldn't process it. But the thing about it is that this is a funny one. So what they're hoping for, of course, is the like of Apple and Google to come in and buy them over, and they'll have that headache. I don't think they'll buy them all. It'll be very interesting to see, does anyone offer any money for any of them? And have them all glossed up there on Cantor Fitzgerald's website and all this, a great opportunity to invest. No one ever gets their money back. And what they say to you is, well, look at sure, if you don't get your money back, sure, you're doing good anyway. This is the baloney. This is the baloney we're dealing with. But they have destroyed our electricity service, and they may think they're going to, for the moment, for this year, they're not going to be electric cars drawn out. There's nobody charging up, I see around the place. And even there is, they haven't the wires in for that. I mean, electric, if everyone went electric, it'd burn out the whole grid system. It's as much as an electric shower on the whole night, charging them. So that's not going to happen in the near future anyway. And so how are they going to deal with this? How are they going to handle it? And what is the unwritten rule? I hope myself that one of the blessings of COVID, if there could be such a thing, I don't agree with the lockdowns at all, but I think what it could be that this will leave everyone poor, and the banks will have no money and nobody will have any money, and that they will stop subsidising them. Because the subsidy for wind energy, the lie about this, the subsidy for wind energy is not the bit extra they get. It's the whole cost of running this on the grid and having a power system for it and everything else. And none of it is assessed under the SCA directive. I spoke about that before. So it's just to let you know that's the situation. Watch your ESB bill. I think people are beginning to hurt big time now. If Joe Duffy's show was anything to go by, then we have this essential item, because you, as I say, you can't run your heat, and some people can't cook. You can't run your cooker, your electric cooker. You can't run your oil heater. My oil heating it requires electricity to run the oil heater. they're central heating. And everything really uses this. Now, I have a generator on the farm, a great little thing, and we could be going in that direction in due course, but it's a noisy thing, and I don't think it's really the answer. It's very hard to beat the power to the system, but there's something very shaky. They've made a mess of it. We'll see what to do, just to be aware. You can't go on like this. Only way that our electricity supplies can be kept cheap, or not cheap, they're dear. We're the second highest in the world, and soon to be the highest. There's only one country in the world, is Togo, and it's a kind of a banana republic. I don't know whether something funny there has higher prices than us. But the only way our electricity prices can be kept down is if the like of Apple and Google and huge big corporations subsidise the electricity from wind. So essentially, a woman up in Finglas or in Bray or in Connemara, living alone, maybe a pensioner or a couple or whatever it is, their bill is going to go up and up and up. And if the only way that can be stopped is to stop paying the wind companies, of course. I don't know how that'll be going. That'll not go down well, and it's probably legally difficult to do it. That's one way. The other way is if the Irish electricity bills are subsidised by Google, Apple and all these big corporations, Facebook and all of these. That's the only way. They're prepared to run this as a charity, because otherwise they can't use the wind totally either. That's all they could do, is some way that they'd cover the cost of a big heap of windmills, buy a big heap of them and let them run free and let them do whatever they do, and pay off the people who own them and let them out, let them get away without taking responsibility for their actions, and then they'll say it makes us look green. But they'll have to pay for their own first, and I don't think Apple or Google are going to come along and subsidise the Irish consumer to that extent. So we're in for a crunch, a massive crunch. Something has to give. A double system, a duplicate system, and it's expanding all the time, and the semi-states like the USP and Bord na Móra building more and more and building it out in the sea and everything else, and you cannot use it. It can't be used. It just can't be used. I've explained that to you now, how that works. You can only let in 65% of the grid demand from wind farms, whether it's onshore or offshore. And offshore are not any better than onshore, to be honest with you. Might be about a percentage better, but you can only let in that amount, and you have to pay them to curtail. It is unbelievable that people have become so absolutely stupid. They can be totally and utterly stupid. And don't forget, and this is very important, the fact that all the windmills are running does not mean it's saving CO2. Several studies have shown when you count everything, you're saving at best 2 or 3%. That's it. So if you were using 1,000 tons of coal to run an island, and you're burning all this wind percentage as we have, you might take it down by maybe 40 tons. So you'd bring it down from 1,000 tons to 960 tons. It's really nothing when you take the cost of running the windmills and the fuel going around to look at them and fix them and all that. It doesn't save anything. That's hard to believe. I know that's hard to believe, but you must remember the electricity supply service is constant. It's 24/7. It has to be running all the time. If the wind drops off, something else has to run it. And that type of a passenger, which the wind energy is not any good. It's like a bus company that has to carry passengers for nothing. The other ones are subsidising it, and so it doesn't affect the demand and the use of electricity at all. All the other plant has to stay there. Why don't they, if they don't agree with me, why don't they get rid of the 6,000 megawatts? We have 6,000 megawatts, 3,700 wind, and we have 2,700 of fast acting plant. So I think that's it. So the total thing there is about 6,000 megawatts. Why don't they run the whole system on that? Well, the answer is, of course, it wouldn't last 10 minutes. You can't do that, and it doesn't do what it says on the tin at all. Folks, that's very good. Give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Just to let you know, keep an eye now and see how they deal with this. They're in a fix now. They wouldn't listen to anybody. They wouldn't heed anyone. And several people can just simple counting. And you have the Irish Energy blog, it deals with that quite a lot too, and it's quite good. It goes into that in great detail. Several engineers and several people are pointing out this all the time. I had John Joe Dooley on here, the engineer, retired engineer, and pointing out this, and nobody wants to know. It's absolutely mad. I don't know what will happen on electricity service. A good little diesel generator might be the job for me, maybe, but if everyone starts using them in towns and that, you could have a noise problem there. Look, I don't know what the answer is. But they've made a complete and utter mess. Another fine mess they've really left us in. Watch for it, be aware of it. You'll hear a lot on the radio. They'll not tell you the whole story. They'll probably know that it's probably deliberate ignorance. Leave it at that. I'm long enough talking now, folks. Yeah, it's unbelievable stuff. So Joe Duffy, and it's all coming on. You're going to hear this now. How are we going to pay electricity bills? The answer is we can't. We can't unless Google or Apple or some of those crowd decide to pay it for us. And I don't think that's going to happen. Bye, lads. Give us a thumbs up, folks. Lads and lassies, and thank you very much. We'll see you back.